Hello, and welcome to week 19 of Ari on TV. This month, we're exploring commitment. We're committed to using our conscience. I whispered a message in this tube. Did you hear it? Could you tell what I said? Probably not. I'm pretending that the message is from my inner voice. It's a small voice that is sometimes called our conscience. What I said in the tube is that we're committed to conscience. Conscience is the voice in your head and the feeling in your heart that tells you if something is right or wrong. Could you tell what I said that time? Probably not that time either, right? Our conscience is an inner and not an outer voice. What I said was that conscience is the voice in your head and the feeling in your heart. It tells you if something is right or wrong. Later this month, we'll explore two different types of commitments UUs make. We're committed to curiosity and we're committed to change. But this week, we're going to talk about how we're committed to using our conscience. But first, welcome into this quiet place of beauty. We come from busy things. Pausing for a moment for the thoughts that quiet brings. Our chalice lighters this week are the Sofanoff family.
We light this chalice for the warmth of love, the light of truth, and the energy of action.
We as Unitarian Universalists have 7 principles. When we use them, we say we affirm and promote 7 principles. That means we agree to them together and act on them. That's commitment, right? These principles grew out of the grassroots of our congregations. They were affirmed by voting on them and are part of who we are as Unitarian Universalists. Our 5th principle even has the word conscience in it. It says the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large. In order for democracy like ours to work, we trust that each person has this inner voice or conscience and uses it when they have a say or a vote in decisions. Conscience is the voice in your head and the feeling in your heart that tells you if something is right or wrong. We Unitarian Universalists believe that everyone has a conscience. Inherent worth and dignity of every person. That goes along with our first principle. Do you remember what that is? Our first principle is the inherent worth and dignity of every person. If everyone has a still, small voice inside guiding them towards good, then they also have worth and deserve dignity. That is our commitment to conscience, one of our core beliefs. We believe there is at least the possibility of good in every person. You have a conscience in you too. Do you know what I said then? You have a conscience in you too. Sometimes it's really easy to tell what your inner voice is saying and to listen to it. Sometimes right and wrong are very easy to tell apart. But what if your inner voice, your conscience was telling you to do something, but that something was against the law? What if you felt like you had to do something that was against the law, but you knew in your mind and in your heart that it was the right thing to do? Would you be committed to your conscience? Would you act to ensure the inherent worth and dignity of every person was honored, even if it meant you might get into trouble? I'm going to share a story with you about just that thing. But before I do, let's enjoy a little bit of music together.
We are gentle, angry people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are gentle, angry people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are land of many colors, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are land of many colors, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are in straight together, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are in straight together, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are peaceful, loving people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are peaceful, loving people, and we are singing, singing for our lives.
Our story this week is about a group called No More Deaths. It's a ministry of the Unitarian Universalist Church of Tucson, Arizona. When they saw people dying of heat and thirst in the desert near their homes, they knew they had to act. Their conscience called to them and told them it was the right thing to do. This is how Jeffrey Baer recalls what happened. He writes, "The July sun beat down, and by mid-morning there was no avoiding the heat. By 10 a.m., the anticipation rose with the heat as nearly 40 humanitarian volunteers gathered in a parking lot just outside the small desert town of Arivaca. Our goal was simple. With 110-degree heat predicted for the coming weekend, we came to put jugs of water out for migrants. The trails we hoped to cover were on the Buenos Aires National Refuge. The refuge starts at the border and extends north 30 miles in one of the most active migrant corridors in Arizona. We arrived at the first water drop after a short drive west. Our caravan stretched up and down both sides of the road, and our first 3 volunteers, with gallon jugs in hand, started up the trail amid applause by onlookers. Soon afterwards, U.S. Fish and Wildlife agents arrived and followed them up the trail. Several minutes went by before our volunteers returned, followed by the agents carrying out the jugs. One by one, the water droppers were called over and cited for littering. The group included a nurse, a retired professor of social work, and a Presbyterian minister. Now, cited means they were given tickets. We drove on to our next stop with law enforcement vehicles now in the caravan. Reverend Fife, a resident of Cascabel and a Hamilton College student, took their jugs and placed them on another migrant trail. Fish and Wildlife agents immediately confiscated the water and again issued citations for littering. We continued west to the third location, which was quite a distance off Arivaca Road and required some hiking. Upon our arrival, we found that our expert in mapping and GPS, the former dean of geosciences at the University of Arizona, was also ticketed for littering, but in his case for giving us guidance to the trailheads. The contrast between the two options for water that day were striking. A gallon of pure, clean drinking water on one hand, and a muddy pool of day-old rainwater on the other. 4 more volunteers, including a preschool teacher and a librarian, placed water along a trail as onlookers pleaded with the agents to leave the water. "Please don't take that water. There are women and children dying out here," they said. Then solemn chanting began as the agents moved to their trucks, emphasizing each word, "No more deaths, no more deaths." The message fell on deaf ears as agents for a third time immediately removed all water and wrote 4 more citations. As the summer sun continued to bear down on us, we arrived at our final planned stop. A Franciscan priest and retired clinical psychologist proceeded to the last drop, but certainly not the least. With abundant enthusiasm, they ducked under the barbed wire to place desperately needed water jugs on known migrant routes, only to be met and cited, as had all the others. After nearly 4 hours, we gathered again, this time on the side of the road, to celebrate the courageous resistance of people of conscience and the communities that stand with them. As the caravan departed in mid-afternoon, we left hopeful and still committed, yet at the same time saddened, as dozens of life-giving jugs of water sat confiscated as evidence of a crime in the back of a truck, instead of on the migrant trail, where it was so desperately needed. We also left burdened by the knowledge that as weekend desert temperatures reached 112 degrees, we would soon hear the news of the next unnecessary deaths that will undoubtedly come. Indeed, as our migrant brothers and sisters continue on this journey, forced to cross in more dangerous areas, we must keep the resolve to continue this work by their side. So the volunteers are helping people in need, yet the people they're helping are breaking the law. The people crossing the desert are doing that because they're entering the United States without permission. The Unitarian Universalist Church of Tucson, Arizona is one of many groups working to end the deaths by advocating for a more humane immigration system, while also trying to meet the basic needs of border crossers. The dignity of all of us as a human family is at stake when conditions are so desperate that people are willing to risk their lives walking through a desert to find a better life. What do you think about the actions of the volunteers? On this trip, the volunteers are unable to provide water because the authorities removed the jugs. Do you think their actions were meaningless? The first UU principle asks that we affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Do you believe the inherent worth and dignity of every person includes affirming and promoting access to water, food, and healthy communities to everyone, even if it's against the law? I'll let you ponder these questions for just a minute. Believe it or not, there are many instances in history where people have needed to be committed to following their conscience and not the law. In RE Lab, we have talked before about how people broke the law in Nazi Germany and occupied European countries by hiding Jewish people and helping them escape to different countries. We've learned how people in the US broke segregation laws that oppressed people of color, We learned how women broke the law by voting in an election before they were allowed to do so. And these are just a few examples. The history of the world is filled with examples of people committed to following their conscience and making the world a better place because of it. I want you to take some time this week and think about those people and learn about some of their stories. And don't forget to visit our virtual RE lab. Before we go, let's say the words for extinguishing the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Until next time, blessed be, my loves.